Hey, what is up, friends and fellow anti-netters? Hey, earlier this week, a longtime anti-netter, the young Nicholas Gatian, I don't know if I pronounced that right, but he has a weird last name, freaking Canadians. He contacted me and he hit an exciting point. You see, he's been using his antinet, aka his analog Zettelkasten, for over a year. And there's a concept that Nicholas Luhmann wrote about in his own Zettelkasten called the ghost in the box. And it's the concept as if when you are communicating and using your notes, an almost ghost like consciousness communication partnership type of entity emerges. And he hit me up earlier this week and said that his own antinet has kind of taken on a life of its own and has become this own alter ego, this communication partner. And so we hopped on a call that was available only to my subscribers, the Scott Shepherd Letter subscribers. And we had about an hour-long Zoom session today. And it was really fascinating, and it was awesome to hear from a bunch of other anti-netters, both longtime users and people very new to this community and to this whole process of analog knowledge development. And so here is the hour-long recording, and I hope you get a lot of value out of it, and I hope it introduces some interesting and new ideas into using your own antinet and developing knowledge the true way, the old way, the deliberate way, the analog way. Peace and love, and I hope you enjoy this video. All right. Bye-bye now. All right. What is up? We got Ronald here as well. Nicholas, you made it.
I did. Yes. I just jogged 2 kilometers in the cold, freezing cold of Canada, and I am here now.
Awesome. This makes this event even more epic and fantastic. Kathleen Spracklin, the legend herself, is here. She has just joined us. Ronald, thank you for joining us as well, man. Glad to have you here. Let's see who
My
else.
pleasure.
Yeah, where are you calling in from, Ronald?
I'm calling in from just outside of New York City. I think
Okay.
I don't have to commute there anymore.
Yeah, awesome. Hey, and I'm glad we coordinated on our dress today. So you got the memo that it was red plaid Wednesdays. So
Right.
have to start that. Um well, fantastic. Yeah, and I've seen you around the subscribers area, the members area. So glad to have you aboard, and glad to have yet another fellow aboard the anti-net revolution and the analog revolution that we are creating all together. It's really cool that to see this movement start to emerge. Like with the Zettelkasten, even just a year and a half ago, there was just really no one taking the whole analog medium seriously. And now you guys probably saw it, how the book has appeared in a library and it's starting to pop up, and so more and more people can be comfortable with pen and paper and just thinking with just themselves. So anyway, yeah, glad to have you here. How are you doing, Kathleen? Oh, let me unmute you 1 second.
Doing great, thank you. Enjoying Zeke.
Yeah, how's Zeke going? Is he growing?
He's growing. He's up to 2.5 shoeboxes.
Oh, excellent.
And plus an extra shoebox, my group of indexes and my author cards and my bib cards just outgrew a shoebox and is now taking up a little room in my third main box.
Yeah. Oh, that's awesome. That is awesome to hear. Yeah. And the what we'll be talking about too, and maybe we can how the format, I think how we should do this and how it'll work, at least how I plan it to work, is Nicholas reached out to me, and he had basically experienced something I've talked about in the book, concept of emergence and the whole ghost emerging and the second mind and that overall consciousness type of experience that we have that Luhmann talked about himself. And so what I'd love to do, we'll kick things off with Nicholas, and then I think what we'll do is we'll come back at the end for some Q&A. And how we'll structure this is, only the subscribers, members will be able to participate on these calls. However, I want to get this information and this knowledge out there and available for other people that are curious about the whole antinet and analog Zettelkasten, to hear about, what we talk about here today on this call. So we'll be distributing this on YouTube after this call ends to, help spread the message and the word. So yeah, that's the plan. Cool. Well, before we kick things off, we'll say hi to Toby. Hey, Toby, thanks for joining us. And we have also Jacob Tulos. Jacob's awesome anti-netter. Jacob's fun nickname is, we call him Jacob, the lowly Mexican boy. He's living in Mexico, but he's actually American. And that is his self-declared nickname. So, hey, what's up, Jacob?
Hey, how's everybody doing?
Good to see you.
Doing very well.
Cool. Well, why don't we kick things off? I'll ask everyone to mute themselves besides Nicholas here, and we'll just hop right into it. And then at the very end, we will kick things back into Q&A, and we'll go that way. And I think the most efficient way to do this is save the Q&A. We can just put your question in the chat, and then we'll just go through it individually at the very end, and we'll try to be efficient, which is something that, is kind of foreign to the land of Scott Shepper, to be efficient and brief, but I'm gonna try my best. We'll be respectful of everyone's time, and we'll get into the really, really good stuff. So let's kick things to Nicholas, who has, before this call, he had some internet and connectivity issues. And so he sprinted over in the cold to his grandparents' house to get Wi-Fi. And so thankfully he's been able to join us.
Yes, I'm glad. It was the build up to it, like at 2 p.m. I'm in Eastern time, so at 2 p.m. internet cuts off, and I'm like, why 1 hour before the call? It could have been before that. And then slowly, as it gets closer, realizing it's not going to come back, and then at 2:30 realizing, nope, okay, I need to go somewhere else. So yes, I'm glad I'm here.
Yeah. So let's thanks for sprinting over in the cold and the freezing cold in Canada. Let's jump into the background. Why don't you tell me about first off, tell everyone how long you've been using the antinet and building your antinet, and then let's jump into what you've seen emerge most recently in using it and how things have transformed for you.
Sure. So I started November last year. No, November 2021 is when I started. So that was the original inception, just because I went through it's a very similar path of like, okay, I'm doing a lot. I'd like to put what I'm learning in one place. Let me go figure out where to put these ideas, going through digital, and then eventually stumbling upon your video and going, hang on a second, this should be analog. And then I started building it up. Last time we talked, I believe was March last year. So about 10 months ago, I had roughly probably 50 note cards in my box. I brought it with me. So now last estimate was at about 1,200 cards. So it's been a hell of a ride. It's been a lot of fun. Recently, what I've been digging into is artificial general intelligence and replicating human level intelligence through artificial means. So it's a little somehow the emergence of consciousness in a box of note cards is related to what I'm doing outside of the box of note cards, which is quite funny to me. So I guess what recently happened now like when I started thinking like, hang on, this is more than just a bunch of, or it feels like more than just a bunch of notes in a box. I was installing one idea, and as I was going through and figuring out where to place it, I just randomly stumbled upon a card that was related to a separate idea that I was also holding, which I was planning to install right afterwards, yet had not written the card for. So that was like the first click of like this, something very strange just happened, because it just showed me a card related to a separate idea to the one that I'm currently installing, yet still related to what I'm currently thinking about.
Mm-hmm.
So that was a very strange feeling.
Yeah, fascinating. And also, what's interesting about like what you've described, and this is what I've talked about in the book, is the whole concept of the ghost in the box of what Luhmann talked about, and how things have just emerge through accidents and through surprises and things that, the way we structure this kind of like, I think the way we structure this, and because it's all like context related, it has a higher proclivity to induce like these more insightful surprises and accidents along the way. The other thing I want to hear more about is like, tell us about, you just touched on it, and I think we all kind of have our own ideas of what you mean by your field of research, like AI, general artificial intelligence, and the intersection of that in creating kind of a human artificial intelligence.
Yep.
Dive into, tell us what books you're reading, what got you interested in this, what is your overall
Sure.
goal with all of this?
Yes. So I'm refabricating the timeline. In October last year, October, I started building with neural networks just out of curiosity, because that's just something that I randomly do sometimes. I'm like, oh, this is an interesting topic, let me go explore it. And so I started building with neural networks. And because I didn't feel like learning the math for backpropagation, I decided to use neuroevolution instead, which is basically another method to evolve neural networks, but it's more based on natural selection than using backpropagation. So my first project with this was to fabricate an artificial ecosystem of sorts with different creatures running around trying to collect food, and then whichever ones collected the most collected food and then were able to reproduce would reproduce, and then their genes would be passed on to further generations. And then because it was all the same environment, eventually one species would just end up dominating all the other ones because it would optimize for that environment. But by adding more environments, I probably could have bypassed that. But after that project, I realized more so that neuroevolution, in my opinion, probably has the capacity to evolve human or close to human level intelligence, in the sense, and one of the reasons for this is that it's done it once before, except it was in the real physical world, but through evolution, we've come about. Mm-hmm. So by replicating a similar process, we can probably, most likely, replicate some kind of human level intelligence on digital environments, on virtual environments. So I started doing more digging. I recently read The Technological Singularity by Murray Shanahan. Mm-hmm. I am currently reading Super Intelligence by Nick Bostrom, and then I have and How to Create a Mind by Ray Kurzweil. But I have a lineup of books now that I'm going through and reading about. I recently had a call with Kenneth Stanley as well, who is one of the co-authors for an algorithm that I've used called the NEAT algorithm. And he exposed me to something called the objective paradox, which states that the best way to reach an objective is to not actually try to reach it, in the sense that, especially in evolution, the stepping stones to reach an objective are not at all obvious. So if you're just trying to follow whichever path will bring you there directly, mm-hmm. you're going to fail. Mm-hmm. Whereas if you're just exploring around, you'll most likely get there eventually. So an example of this is a website called Pick Breeder, which is basically you can select 2 images, breed them, and then it'll output a new generation of images that you can select 2 again and breed them, or you can just select 1 and mutate it. Through this process of just random like pixels and noise and so on, interesting patterns emerged like skulls or cars or butterflies and so on. And it's because of our own perception that we look at it and go, hey, that looks like a butterfly. But it was through complete randomness that people randomly stumbled upon them and just selected them and saved them and went, hey, that's interesting. Let me show this to other people. When Kenneth tried to replicate this using an algorithm to search for these patterns, one of these patterns could take like 12 generations to randomly find through exploration and people finding it interesting, whereas a computer trying to reach it had spent like 30,000 something generations and wasn't even close.
Mm-hmm.
So through trying to reach the objective, you can't actually reach it.
Mm-hmm. And you're tackling the field that is, has become like the hot field of this past year, right? It's like the new shiny object that everyone's talking about.
ChatGPT had a lot of influence on that.
Mm-hmm,
like
mm-hmm.
ChatGPT kind of came out of the blue as well. And my first thought for that one was, I wonder if we can evolve this process instead of designing it.
Yes, exactly. I think what you're touching on, and what you touched on in the in when you reached out and updated me on what you're starting to experience with the antinet. I don't think it's a coincidence that you've kind of had this this thought and breakthrough around like consciousness, because you're this topic, this field is on your mind. And
Mm-hmm.
I've had other people that are like deep, AI researchers, and I've gotten these long, elaborate emails that are really fascinating to read about how I think using the antinet and using and structuring your knowledge in a physical, real world, like seeing the spatial representation of all of your knowledge and interacting it with in like a tangible, non-digital way, has given people that are researching this type of field, this AI, almost like a leg up in a more creative way to look and think about the field of artificial intelligence than most people, like 99% of people, are actually thinking about it, which is an interesting thing, an interesting, I think, opportunity and interesting benefit of using the antinet is it really makes you think a lot differently about the field and about knowledge itself, and your own what is consciousness, right?
Mm-hmm.
Then I think a lot of people do.
Something that really fascinated me was, as I was reading your book, The Antinet Zettelkasten, I kept randomly like reading something and then going, hang on a second, that applies to artificial general intelligence.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I know we're talking about note boxes, but that applies to the other thing that I'm working on. So like a parallel that I'm still trying to piece together, because I know there's probably a connection there, but I'm still like thinking about it and letting it sit, is the concept of embodiment in artificial general intelligence. There's one of the beliefs that's held by quite a few people is that for a system to truly become intelligent, it needs to be physical. It needs to be able to explore its environment,
Mm-hmm.
which is kind of a similar belief to what you hold with analog, where a system must be analog in order to actually, like as one of the 4 principles, it needs to be analog in order to actually have a sense of, or at least a perception of consciousness to emerge. So that's one parallel that I'm still trying to figure out. But I was wondering if, first question I could ask you is, if you have any kind of intuition as to what exactly the ghost in the box is. Why is it happening?
I think what it involves, at least, is that that whole concept I talk about of internal monologue versus internal dialogue, there's almost like it sets off these two tracks in your mind when you see the note card written in your own handwriting, and it acts as a cue that puts you, in the state, and it reminds you of where you were when you actually wrote that note card. So that's one aspect of it. I think the actual ghost is that not only are you informed in processing the context, which is the words on the actual note, you're also processing that internal context, that memory of where you were, what you were thinking, what you were reading when you actually wrote that note. And it's almost like a rediscovering process where you're kind of having a communication experience of like trying to figure out, wait, what was I really trying to say at that point? Or, wow, I completely forgot about this. So there's that type of dialogue, which I think is that captures kind of that ghost in the box type of experience, versus when you look at your notes in Obsidian or any text file, Markdown, whatever, from 10-15 years ago, you don't really see that, that you're not given that that cue that puts you back into that same place where you first wrote it, which is, it mirrors, and I've talked about this in the book too, it mirrors that same exact experience where you hear a song, for me, and I've I think I used listening. I actually maybe admitted in print that I at one point was a big fan of Coldplay. This is like back in 2006. And whenever I hear a certain song from that certain Coldplay album, I'm immediately transported back into my state of mind where I was in 2006 on a trip in Hawaii with my family, listening to that one song, that one album. And so when I listen to that song, I'm not just listening to the context of that song. I'm also experiencing this whole internal experience of of the remembering that memory of where I was, how far I've come, what I was doing at the time, what my goals were at the time. And so that whole like cue in that process is something that actually I think happens, and it happened to me like last night before I I wanted to like go and review some of my old legacy cards last night, and the same exact thing happened. Like I was transported back in time to a specific moment. So I think that's one of the aspects and one of the properties of the whole ghost in the box of what Lumen was talking about, like when he wrote that card. It's that the internal dialogue experience. So yeah, that's my answer. I also would love to get, maybe we can, I don't know if we'll do this now, or do you have more questions? But because I want to ask everyone here that's participating what their own take and their own experience, has been, and what they think the ghost in the box is. So, do you have more questions lined up, or do you want to?
I mean, I had one quick follow-up about that, because basically the internal dialogue is basically a conversation between your conscious mind reading what you wrote, and then your unconscious mind bringing back like everything that you were thinking about when you wrote that card. And it's very funny how like I'm very surprised as to how accurately I can remember where I wrote cards. Like not only the building that I was in when I wrote it, like whether I was at home or at grandparents' house, or if I was somewhere else, like the location, but I can remember which floor of my own house that I was in when I wrote specific cards. When I see that card, I know exactly where I wrote it. So that's very interesting. But I guess a follow-up on the subconscious and conscious dialogue. In the book, you quickly threw out a like benchmark of 1,000 cards, I think, where it like reaches a critical mass, where then that feeling starts to emerge. So why is it, first of all, I guess, was that just a random number, or was there like some kind of step to get to 1,000? And then secondly, why why is there a certain amount of like critical mass needed for the unconscious and conscious mind to actually start having a dialogue when you read old cards?
Yeah, I think it's that revolves around forgetting as well. Like when you only have a small chunk of cards, you kind of have them in working memory. And so the 1,000 cards, having 1,000 cards of as the necessary like precursor for that critical mass for it to become bigger than the sum of its parts, I think revolves around the strength of forgetting some of it and not having it actually live in your working memory. And I was just thinking about this recently, and I really do. I hold that my 4214 branch of my own antinet is one where I constantly I think it also has to do with when I review that, I'm like humbled by it. Like I'm like, holy crap, like I completely forgot about this. And this is very interesting. And then I start exploring the cards surrounding it. And it's almost like as if it humbles me. And having 1,000 cards in that full stack is I think it's like spatially big enough where it's like the tree, like the forest of knowledge is essentially thick enough for you to almost submit to it and be like, okay, well, what else can I find here? How should I have all this like this deeply packed knowledge in here. If I'm going to go look up a certain concept, I'm not going to just if I'm reading a book right now and I come across the concept of memory or human memory or something, or even a smaller concept that is smaller than the overall concept of human memory. I know now from experience that I need to go review that whole section on human memory, because I'm going to have those ideas like reinstalled that I thought I knew, but I completely, a lot of it I've forgot about. And yeah, I don't know. That's I kind of touched on a lot of things and didn't directly answer what you were getting at, which is, why 1,000 cards to unlock that kind of ghost in the box communication partner experience. And I didn't directly answer it, but I kind of answered it through an indirect means, which is you need to forget
process. Yeah.
you need to forget in order to to create the magic of remembering. And I think the remembering is a concept that happens better in the analog form, because you're given all of that cue, that external context, and that related information about, oh, what was I reading at this point in time? Like what was, I can tell even certain cards just based on my handwriting and my style. And early on in the journey, like I wrote without a ruler, which meant like my handwriting and like the cards were kind of like misaligned and diagonal and kind of wavy, like the lines. Like, and then I can tell when I switched over to a more neater fashion using a ruler, and even just those signals and those cues are helpful. So yeah, anyway, that's
So it's like a process of wandering and remembering as you're wandering through.
Mm-hmm.
Cool.
Yep, exactly.
All right. Well, did you want to open it up?
Yeah, let's open it up to the audience. Let's see. Is there anyone, before I get into the questions, is there anyone that wants to hop on first and talk about something related to this on their own experience in using their antinet and almost triggering this similar type of experience, the ghost in the box type of experience, where all of a sudden their antinet becomes bigger than the sum of its parts, and it's humbled them, like how I've put it. Okay, there we go. We got Ronald that would like to yeah, I'll call on you, Ronald.
Sure, thanks. I'm fascinated by the whole idea of the ghost in the box. Comes from a play on words, a ghost in the machine, if you're a Gibson fan.
Yeah.
A lot of sci-fi I read as a kid. So I started my early life working in a creative pursuit of photography. So I was always a very creative person, big reader, barely ever took notes. So when I started taking notes digitally, I found exactly what you're saying. You can use an app like Readwise, which resurfaces things, spaced repetition, but it seems to me that it's like, I don't know, it's randomly resurfacing things. You don't make that ghost in a box connection, that spooky feeling when you get the collision of two ideas that you've been holding in your head at some point that are now in your head at the same time. And I think the antinet helps with that. And another example I could use from my day-to-day life, and this happens to me all the time. I work sitting in front of a computer for about 10 hours a day, most of it staring at lines of code, trying to find the bug. If it's a syntax error, easy to spot. If it's a logic bug, anybody who's a programmer knows, God help us. So if I'm stuck for more than 20 minutes in one spot, I get up, put on my coat, I have a park nearby, and I go for a walk. And I literally call that debugging. And I'll just think about anything but my problem. And without fail, the answer comes to me while I'm on that walk. Usually when I'm in the trees with nature, deer around me, it'll just poof, pop into my head. And I look at that as almost the same experience that you feel with the ghost in the box. That sudden aha moment that is like, that's going to work. And half the time I don't even have to write it down. I just come back home and I try it. And I'm like, look at that, man. I wasted a half an hour when I could have just gone out for an hour walk, took my lunch and fixed it. And I find the same thing while I'm reading using bib cards. I use the two-step. So I'll take keywords, page numbers, and oftentimes just a keyword in the page number is enough to remind me, oh yeah, this book I'm reading by Steven Pinker right now about how the mind works relates to what Scott was talking about in the Antinet book, which also relates to another book that I read 6 years ago. Sometimes my brain just makes the connections without even going to the cards. And not often, but when it happens, it's kind of creepy. It's almost like I'll flip right up to the big bibliography of the book and I'll say, yep, that's exactly the page and the author that I was talking about of a book I read 6 years ago. So part of it's my ADD, and if I'm on my meds and I'm having a good day, but it does happen spontaneously. But I find that it happens more frequently if you're disciplined about keeping your notes and keeping them organized. And as you're going through saying, where should I install this thought or this card, you find these serendipitous, kind of collisions, I call them. Knowledge A plus knowledge B equals completely new idea. And that is kind of a definition of creativity. It's completely unique.
Yeah, you touched on a lot of important concepts in there that we can open a tab on and go deep on. I think one of the things I'd like to talk about briefly is the whole concept that you're describing in the park of going to the park and putting your conscious mind, your mind was struggling, your conscious mind was struggling to solve this problem. And what you've kind of done and what you've essentially done is you essentially put your subconscious mind at work on the problem. You went to the park, you consciously, did not focus on the problem. You cleared your mind, but in the background, your subconscious mind was working on the problem. It's like a background process, essentially. And this reminds me, I think all of you guys here know, guys and gals here know that, I'm a big fan and have studied and read up a lot on the late great copywriter Gary Halbert. And I was one of my friends and colleagues was telling me a story because he used to work with Halbert as a protege and live with him for an entire year. And he told me a story about how Gary Halbert, whenever he was trying to solve a problem, kind of like exactly what you're going through, he would purposefully and deliberately tell his subconscious mind, he would say, all right, subconscious, before he went to bed, I want you to solve this problem for me before he went to bed. And even the next day, he would take my friend out and they would go around. I think they were living in Florida at the time. They would go around and just screw around, do nothing, drive, the car around to one place, drive to another place, and purposefully not consciously work on the problem. And then all of a sudden, Gary Halbert would stop at 3 in the afternoon. They'd be just driving back and forth to a random place all day, just doing nothing. And he'd stop and be like, drive me back home. We got to go write this now. We got to go write this sales letter now, or this piece of copy now, or this piece. And he would just stream for I don't know, 5 hours, 8 hours at a time. And that came about through, which I found interesting, is telling your subconscious to deliberately work on the problem. Be like, hey, go work and figure this out. I'm going to go, consciously not focus on it at this time. So, anyways, I wanted to add my own anecdote and story to that. So, yeah, that's really fascinating. Thanks for sharing, Ronald. And yeah, glad to see all of you in person instead of just seeing your avatars. It's really cool. Let's open it up to anyone else. Anyone else want to add about their own antinet experience and where they're at, and kind of this experience we're all talking about and touching on is the that internal dialogue and the ghost in the box. All right, we got Douglas. Yeah, go ahead, Douglas.
My internet is still too small to experience this with the internet, just a few cards, but I have a related experience with other note cards I took before using let's say, this internet workflow.
Mm-hmm.
When I was using note cards more in the Ryan Holiday way or commonplace book.
Mm-hmm.
The things that I have noted down on my commonplace book or any kind of notes I had, suddenly later, months later, or maybe 1 or 2 years later, when I was researching a certain topic, it was like that vivid image in my mind. Like Nicola said, he remembers where he was sitting when he was writing that note. I remember that thing, and I remember, oh, I'm writing this right now about
Mm-hmm.
whatever, and this relates with that thing that I was researching last year. I remember taking a note about that in a certain book. I don't remember exactly the book, but I remember the note. I remember the notebook.
Mm-hmm.
And then I start to get everything and do a mess over on my table, and I find that note and I find those connections. So now that we have a good structure with the internet, I'm anxious to see how this will develop later, because it was already good without structure. Imagine now that we have a good structure.
Yeah, you nailed it. I was going to say that today too, is, and like last night I was reviewing my legacy cards that are still, they're not installed yet into the antinet, into the actual system, in the certain branch, and they don't have a numeric alpha, address on it yet. It still launches me into that same exact experience that like Nicholas talked about, of I'm able to like remember and recall exactly where I was, and that concept, that I took, let's say, 15 years ago, I still understand it and remember it, which is only possible through, me essentially writing it down, taking that time to write it down by hand. One more thing, Douglas, I want to unmute you again, and I want you to share when you started your antinet and where you're calling in from, and what your experience has been like so far using it.
Oh, so I'm from Brazil, São Paulo, southeast
Okay.
part of Brazil, and I started collecting notes regularly in a more structured way 2 years ago, but in digital form, and my internet started 2 weeks ago.
Okay. So you're new.
Really
Well,
recent.
welcome.
Yeah, really new.
Yeah.
Start with your book.
Yeah. Yeah. You know, and I'm curious to hear what other people have, you know, that have used, you know, like the Ryan Holiday note box method, which is really just what we're referring to there is just note cards organized by, you know, book or by category, right? In my experience in shifting over to the more robust, you know, the antinet, it has made it a lot easier to find and retrieve notes so that you can constantly add and evolve the ideas behind the concept. So yes, I definitely wish I had done it, you know, 15 years ago. But still, even though I have a ton of cards, two and a half maybe boxes that are not yet installed in the antinet, I've gotten significant value out of them just from the strengths and the properties of slowing down to write them out by hand. And, you know, so I think a lot of people, if you're like new to this and new to the antinet and you're like, man, like, am I doing this right? It's like, if you're writing it down by hand and on a note card, then you're doing it right. Even if you like, even if the numeric alpha addresses and the whole tree structure and, you know, the taxonomy branches, all of that, you know, if I'm sure, you know, it's as Kathleen knows, you know, it's she's working on trying to make it, you know, easier as well. It's overwhelming, like for a person brand new. And so it's like the you know, I think the one thing that should give everyone peace of mind is you're getting significant value and benefit and way I think way more value out of compared to, you know, Obsidian and the bubble graph tools and digital tools if you just write it down by hand, right? On note cards. So anyway, I wanted to say that and get that out at some point during this. So this served as a fantastic way for me to elaborate on that. Yeah.
It was already valuable taking notes by hand on notebooks. I mean, I have piles of notebooks from years ago, but now moving these old notes, the legacy notes, to note cards using the tree structure and organizing information has the potential to be much more effective. And I was trying to use Obsidian. I never ever got anything valuable from the graph view. People usually wonders about the graph view, how it helps you. From it, I noticed that in the end, it's just a gimmick. It's beautiful. It's beautiful to see the animation of the notes connecting, but real value was like only by sit down and thinking. Put the brain to work, not Obsidian to work.
Yep, exactly. Preaching to the choir on that. I don't want to buy into the temptation right now to just start riffing on Bubble Graph Boys and Obsidian. So I'll keep this thing flowing along. Yeah, thank you for sharing, Ronald, or not Ronald, Douglas, and great to meet you, man. And it's awesome to hear that we are spreading around the globe here too. So yeah. Who else wants to you could just use the hand raise to add something, but does anyone else have I'd love to hear anyone else's experience using the antinet and the ghost in the box and consciousness and their own experience lately. Yes, Jacob, the lowly Mexican boy, let's do this.
That's right, the lowly Mexican boy. Something I've noticed personally from Kathleen put a message in the chat, the power of forgetting. Something I've noticed about my own memory of notes that I've written is it feels like the resolution of that memory decreases over time. Like the longer it's been since I've written a note, my resolution of that memory, it gets lower and lower. So I still remember writing a note about topic X, but I start to forget a lot of the details that I wrote about that topic. And not only do I not remember those details, but I don't remember that they're even are details. And so that element of surprise is fascinating, because I may write a card or a note, and I might say, oh, I remember that there is already a branch of thought in my antinet that this would fit right in with. And so then I go and find that branch of thought, and it is about the topic that I remembered. But then when I read those cards, I realize that the opinions that I had, or the thesis I was developing in that branch of thought, is completely opposite from what I'm now writing in this card. And I just
That's
didn't
the
remember
best.
that.
Yep.
And it's almost as if now I'm having a debate or an argument with my past self, because I don't remember those. Even if I do remember them after reading those cards, it still feels like another person, because I now hold a different perspective in my mind now. And it's a unique experience that I think helps to explain that idea of the ghost, because it's almost as if, I like to think of it this way: I cloned myself dozens of times, and I assigned a reading list to each clone, and then all those clones came back with all their notes, and we're all comparing notes, and we can't share each other's current thoughts, but we all share a common, like, further back history of our lives. So we all come from the same perspective, but we just don't have any idea what each one has been doing over the last few days as we each pursued our individual reading lists. And now we're comparing notes. And like, the perfect research partner would be a clone of yourself with your same perspective, because then you can speak in shorthand and you have inside jokes. Oh yeah, like that time you stubbed your toe when you were 5 and blah, blah, blah. Well, you're able to use that same reference system, which is amazing, because it builds complex ideas very quickly. Of course, you still have to get outside perspectives. Like, you can't just be like a circular form of logic, but for the time being, you're having a conversation essentially with yourself. You're able to build knowledge very quickly.
Yep. Exactly.
Can I add something to that, or point something out and add a question?
Yeah.
So you reference the second, like, the box as practically like when you run up towards something, or a card or an idea that you had written down that you no longer agree with. It feels like a clone that you're then arguing with. So when talking about the consciousness in the box, and this goes to Scott and just everyone in the call as well, Jacob, does it feel like someone else, a clone, or is it more or less yourself? An idea that I'm currently, like, again, trying to formulate is practically that the consciousness is only there when you're flipping through it, and without you, there's nothing there. Similarly to if someone else flips through your antinet, they're not going to feel anything. So when you're flipping through it, does it feel like someone else, or does it feel exactly like yourself?
And just to clarify, what is the it part? The
antinet.
Okay.
Or just that feeling that arises.
That's an interesting question.
For me, I would say it's not so much a stranger, but it's also not myself. It's more like a close friend who can read my thoughts. You know, you have those kind of people that used to mention using a mental shorthand. You know, you got inside jokes and things like that. Somebody who knows you so well, but is able to challenge your past beliefs or the way you thought about something 6 years ago versus the way that you look at the issue today. That's how I look at it.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. And I also think it makes it easier when you see your own contradictions. It makes it easier to press and challenge yourself than, as if you're, sometimes getting that information, from an external third-party authority, where we're like, oh, well, he's probably right. It's like, no, where it's like when you get contradicting information, which is, I think, the best part, one of the strongest features of the antinet is, when you go back and you see in your own handwriting this new idea that you have from your latest reading, you know, you're like, okay, I'm gonna go, you know, talk about this and how this is the way, and then you go back and review a card that says, well, actually, that is the exact opposite of the point, you know, the way, and you know, which allows you, it's almost like, I guess, how Jacob would describe it. It's like you've got like, you know, two past clones arguing with one another, and how do you actually find the distinction of who's right, who's wrong, what points are right, what points are wrong? How do we come to create some, you know, some semblance of these different contradictions? Jacob, I just saw you were raising your hand. Do you want to add something?
Yeah, that's why I think you encapsulated it well. That's why I think of it as a clone. I know, or I think I remember correctly that Luhmann actually used doppelganger,
Yep.
because he wasn't alive in the age of cloning being anything outside of a science fiction novel, I guess. But that's why I use that expression clone, because it is yourself, but it's also not, because you've changed since. And to address my thoughts on what Nicholas said, is the consciousness actually in the box if you're not interacting with the box? And I kind of look at it as like it's a floppy disk. So it's an image that has been saved on the drive, but it has to be loaded back up in here in order for it to actually feel like a consciousness. And actually it's like it's an encrypted disk, because if it goes to any other mind, it won't make sense.
Yeah.
And the consciousness isn't there. In fact, they won't even get my consciousness, because it's not a chronological diary that I'm writing to myself, but also someone else might be able to read it and understand it. It's gibberish to anyone else but me. Like, I appreciate that Scott spent a lot of time taking pictures of his antinet cards, but most of them were kind of gibberish to me.
Yeah,
to be honest,
that's
because they're encrypted for your mind.
Yeah, that's the interesting thing is, you know, I've released, you know, about like 1,000 screenshots of my own, you know, for my own antinet, for my own, you know, of my own cards that were used to write the book, right? And so what's interesting is when I released that, I was like, oh my God, this is like the most valuable product and the most valuable thing that everyone is going to you know, find benefits from, and I'm going to hear about it. But what's interesting is I've not, you know, no one has talked about it or told me, oh, I really liked, you know, seeing your own, you know, your antinet box. I found it valuable is because, and I'm sure there a lot of people have, and the reason that they found it valuable is probably because they're like, oh wow, look at this mess. Like, I don't have to be like super neat and ordered, and like you know, this thing is just pure chaos, and there's like, you know, sequences of cards and whiteout all over the place, and it's just chaos and craziness. And I think what it is, really the main benefit is it's given people the confidence to just to go and start. And you know, because when I look at that, I'm like, man, that is like so freaking valuable. And I'm like, because it makes sense in my head. Like, I see the different colors and why things are there, and you know, certain numbers and sequences. Like, to me, I know like 4214/3A is a huge section that just emerged and blew up and contains me just dispelling a lot of the myths of Zettelkasten, and people just will, you know, glide right by that because they don't have that that internal meaning. You know, my software that works for me, when I install that disk, you know, in my head, I'm like, oh, this is super valuable, right? So yeah, that's and you know, in my book I talk about this as well, and I think Ann Blair talks about this, and how you know, your notes are a means, you know, they're your thinking partner. So yeah, that thanks for sharing that. Real quick before we go on to I want to involve other people here as well. But Jacob, tell us, you know, what you're using the antinet for, and you know, your background. I know you've been you know, Jacob is responsible for writing a ton of books that maybe you guys have even read, but he's a ghostwriter, so his name is not attached to it. But so tell us about your recent undertaking and focus.
Yeah, I've worked as a ghostwriter for 16 years. I've written fiction, nonfiction for all kinds of clients. That sounds really exciting, but any excitement you feel, get rid of it really quickly. It's not nearly as exciting as it sounds. It's actually, unfortunately, I mean, well, I don't want to make it negative, but it's kind of exploitation is what it is, because it's often a race to the bottom. You're writing words for the lowest rate because that's how you win the bid. And oftentimes the clients are not, rock stars that want their story told, but usually they're people who want to make money off of what you write by self-publishing it on Kindle, stuff like that. So yeah, it's a wild and savage world out there, but it's really exciting to be able to develop your craft essentially on someone else's dime, which is the way I like to look at it. But I got into the idea of the antinet, the Zettelkasten, before I found Scott, because I was constantly wanting to learn more to just develop my knowledge and perhaps one day write something under my own name. But I felt really stupid reading books because I felt like I didn't remember most of what I read. Like a year later, I didn't remember most of what I had read in a certain book. The idea of the resolution, again, like I remember the basic idea of the book, but I feel like most of it just slipped through my fingers. And so I stopped feeling stupid and decided I needed to get smart about how I did that. So I started looking into ways to take notes, to organize knowledge. And I went down the Obsidian rabbit hole and the second brain rabbit hole and a million other rabbit holes that are available online that kind of lead you around in a circle. And eventually, after a great deal of internal debate, settled on analog as the way to go. And since then have been able, man, just things are exploding. The things that I remember, I think the things I remember when the internet is not even within reach is amazing as a result of working on the internet. So it's been quite a journey.
Yeah. Thanks for sharing, Jacob, and glad you found this community. I think a lot of my goal is to help people like Jacob and everyone, the true thinkers, the true creatives, the true writers, give them not only a system to develop knowledge, but here's how to not only develop knowledge, but distribute that knowledge. And then also, how do we monetize that knowledge if we need to? Some of us are, don't necessarily need to, or we don't necessarily, need to monetize our knowledge, but we want to make an impact. We want to build a tribe, and we want to see our, creative or intellectual work, actually reach the people that we care about. And so, yeah, I'm super excited to help, Jacob, everyone, to create a life where we can actually, publish our knowledge under our own name and make a comfortable living doing so, not having to, yeah. And it's funny. It's like, I know this doesn't just happen, Jacob, with ghostwriters in the self-publishing world. I know one best-selling book out there that all the big YouTubers are talking about, like Ali Abdaal, and they're like, this is the best book ever. Well, I'm friends with the author. He's a good friend. And he did not write one word of that book. He has a ghostwriter, right? Not to say that that's bad. Like, he's not a writer, and that's fine. But a lot of the stuff, the best-selling pop nonfiction stuff is not written, by the actual person that's on the front cover. And while that sells a lot of books and their ideas are kind of like simplistic, and that's good for them, I think the people that I want to see start dominating and flourishing are the ones behind the scenes, the actual ghostwriters like Jacob, that want to spend their days actually creating original ideas, thinking super hard, writing, taking notes, enjoying having an awesome lifestyle, while also, making a fantastic living. And yeah, anyway, I'll cut myself off now, but I think I figured out a pretty pretty freaking awesome model to really empower the independent intellectuals and creators and writers and all that stuff. But I'll save that for another time. Anyway, let me take a look at this chat before we go. Yeah, Kathleen, why don't you speak up? I think I saw that you don't know the whole hand raising thing. So I think let me unmute you. There we go. Hey, Kathleen.
Okay, hey, I'll research the hand raising thing later. What I wanted to, the reason I raised my hand is that I want to encourage the new people out there who are just really getting started. Just recently, just the power of belonging to this community has been phenomenal for me. I've had my Zettelkasten for 1 year and 12 days. And thankfully, I never went down the Obsidian raffle because I stumbled onto Scott when it was part of my first search for how to do this stuff. But I have learned so much just in our community in the number of days that we've had our community. And it's fed back into, oh, Scott said that, and it didn't sink in. I read it in the book. I read right past it and it didn't sink in. But communicating with you folks on that chat is so powerful in our community. I think we're really building something great. So I wanted to very quickly tell the newcomers what I learned. It took me 1 year to learn and 12 days on this community. So here it is. One, the first layer of value, of course, is handwriting. Blow it away. That's the biggest benefit you'll get.
Mm-hmm.
Then you get another little incremental benefit when you number each card. I was using clumps and dividers because I didn't want to tackle the problem of numbering each card. Go ahead and number it. Go ahead and make your mistakes. You'll be able to figure out where you want your cards. But number every card. And then the next, that gave me another pop, a little bit of a pop on it. Oh, that's more, I'm engaging more deeply with my cards than just sorting them into clumps. But wow, the real bang came just recently with the question of finding where you're going to put that note before you write it out. I do a 2-step bib card. My bib cards, I think I wrote 29 bib cards on the Zettelkasten book. I am a prolific bib writer because I don't have a memory. And if I wrote a page and a key number, I'd have to go back to that page. So I write out the concept and I've got a color scheme and everything. But I was just sitting down with my bib cards and translating them, copying them off the bib cards, kind of secretarial fashion onto my note cards, and then later on filing them in. Well, let me tell you, there's a phenomenal difference finding out where that card is going to go first, relating it to the cards around it, and then you're speaking into your note cards with the new information. And I don't know if it was Jacob or Aaron's, and I don't have a memory, so I have to apologize, but that's why I need the Zettelkasten. But it was one of you folks in the chat who turned me on to that, and I will forever be grateful because that was another monumental game, almost as big as writing by hand. And I wanted to share that with the community and the value of this community.
Yeah, awesome, Kathleen. Thank you so much for sharing that. Yeah, that's the figuring out where you're going to install the card before you write it out is a game changer. I think, especially if you're working on a project, as well, because that adds to the cohesion. So when you come up with I'm going to install this right here, and I'm also, especially if there's a contradiction with the previous card, I'm also going to clarify that, or address that contradiction with the previous card, and then continue to elaborate and evolve on this emerging idea. So yeah, and then the first thing, that's what I wanted to say. Second thing is, I'll brag on your behalf. I know you don't like to, but Kathleen is a very early computer. You know me, I'm the marketing guy. I have to. It's in my blood. I have to brag on your behalf. So I'll do it so that I'll save you from doing it. Kathleen is a very early pioneer in the computing world. She's a microcomputer chess champion, who is I know, Nicholas, I don't know if you're still 17, maybe you're 18 at this point.
I'm 16.
But
actually.
yeah, it still doesn't matter, because Kathleen, in terms of sharpness, is going to dance circles around you, brother. She is just as it's funny. Like Kathleen's in her 70s and is, embodies the principle of never stop learning, sharpening the mind, and is studying. Last I checked, linguistics, is going deep into that, and is now working on a book that's more in the realm of fiction, which is super fascinating. And I can't wait for Kathleen's book to show up in the library. Maybe it'll be near the antinet Zettelkasten book. But yeah, anyways, I wanted to provide some bragging background on Kathleen before we move on. All right, who else wants to speak? Let me check out this chat. Oh yeah, we got Douglas. Who else wants to talk on their experiences of using the antinet and of this whole concept of the internal ghost and the ghost in the box and their experience? We have Massimiliano in here. We've got Stephanie Roy in here. Nicolaos. Yeah.
Okay.
Massimiliano.
Massimiliano. Okay.
Massimiliano. Yeah. Let's hear from you. Great background, by the way.
Okay. Do you hear me?
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm sorry. I understand enough what you said, but my English is not very good, so I'm sorry for this. I'm from Rome, Italy, and I am a PhD student in dogmatic theology. So my experience is that what I feel, what I think is that the ghost in the box, it's my experience is he lives in eternal present, because Zettelkasten, antinet, is what I was looking for in my previous studies. So I studied motor science, pedagogy, and educational, and theology. So I was looking for in my academy career what I found now in Zettelkasten, and so now it's what I have, Zettelkasten, and when and who I am now. Okay, and it is what I will study, and when I will meet him, okay, today or 1 year, okay, is I meet myself. So now is what I was, what I am now, who I am now, who I was, who I am now, and who I will tomorrow. So it's amazing because he teaches me who I am. I am the same during the time. So when I read my card that I wrote 1 year later or 6 months, it's me here, and now I feel that there is a fight between two forces inside of me. One force is write your thesis, your dissertation, because you have to finish. Okay, I'm too late because I had some problems with my family and other things, etc. The other force is be yourself and go on to do this, because this is who you are. Okay, and change my my mind for studying, for writing. It's very, very hard, but it's me. This is me. So thank you for this opportunity, and thank you for sharing this my experience. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing. Massimiliano or Massimiliano.
Okay.
Massimiliano.
You can say Massi.
Massi.
Say Massi.
Hey,
Okay.
did your book finally arrive? It did, right?
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah.
Awesome.
It's-
Yeah, our international folks are, yeah, most of them have gotten the book by now, but there's still a few, yeah, trickling in. So, I think the holidays delayed things. Yep, awesome. Kathleen's showing it as well. Yeah, thank you so much for sharing, Masi. I like that. That's easier. I'll work up to the second part, but let's start with Masi for now. All right, before we wrap things up, let me I know Stephanie's busy. Nikolaos, do you want to chime in? No pressure, you don't have to, but just in case you want to add something, or I know you've been using the antinet for a long time, so if there's anything you want to add, feel free to unmute yourself and hop on. All right, I'll take that as a no. He was just in the chat. So yeah, let's start to wrap things up here. I think we've covered a lot, and it was awesome getting to hear a little bit more about everyone here and your backgrounds and using the antinet. We're all at different parts in the journey. So yeah, Nicholas, let's close things out with you. Is there anything else that you wanted to touch on or add before we close things out? It's funny, as I think the question that you asked of, hey, is it you, or is it an alter ego, or is it something else, is something that to really contemplate on, because I found myself wanting to say, oh yeah, that's me initially, but then I was like, you know what, is it actually me if whenever I review it, I'm disagreeing with it, right? So it's almost like it's a past version of me, the antinet, and almost every single note we create is it's like a past version of us locked in and present in each individual note card. So anyway, something to contemplate. That was a great question you asked. So
Thank you.
Yeah.
I guess last point on that question for you, Scott. I know you looked a lot into Nicholas Luhmann's archives. So I don't know if there's anything that emerges, any kind of consciousness that emerges on your part when you're reading through someone else's archives, because my assumption is that there wouldn't be anything, but maybe I'm wrong, because I have not read through many people's archives, many people being zero other than my own. So yeah, I don't have anything else to add, but
yeah. Nicholas Luhmann's, like, when you go down and go through the rabbit hole on his archive, it's a little bit different and distinct because first it's written in German, but he did have, what's interesting is he did write a lot in French as well. Like when he would read French, the French version of a book and research, and he would also write his notes in French instead of, like, writing them back in German. He also wrote some notes down on his bib cards in English, but his handwriting on his bib cards was a lot more sloppy than his actual main cards. So it's like just as hard to read his English on bib cards as it is to read his, like, neatly written German. I swear. It's like once you get the translation, you're like, are you sure that actually says that? And you can kind of see, it. So yeah, so that's one thing. I will not say I haven't had, that my own like ghost in the box type of experience in viewing his note cards. If I were to view others, I know there's other archives out there and viewing their thoughts, like, Abraham Maslow had a whole archive of note cards, and there's many other scholars that have note card or their note cards. I think even W. Ross Ashby, who pioneered cybernetics and Luhmann referenced a lot and read, he has a note card index art, and I think you can find his archive online somewhere. And I've viewed his, and I didn't get that same, Ghost in the Box, that type of experience. So there is something there, and I think Ann Blair and other scholars have written about it as well. When you're viewing the archives of, someone else's, like some author's estate, it is a lot of the times, like, it doesn't look like much, right? But it is everything to that author. Scott Fitzgerald has an estate, with all of his notes, and Hemingway has an estate, and they're kept in various parts of the world, like museums. But I haven't, had any of that same type of feeling when I view my own notes, because there's like, a whole deeper understanding that I see when other person just sees scribbles and indecipherable, jumble of text. I see, wow, something very fascinating and interesting. So yeah, that's just, I see myself, in the notes. And yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
Well, I don't have anything else. So
Well, yeah. Well, me either. Thank you so much for everyone for hopping on here. And once again, this is yet another experiment. And the only right answer is test. Our even the membership community was largely an experiment. It's like, okay, let's see if people find value in this. I created the whole course and everything, and I was like, okay, well, I'm not going to promote the member, the whole social component of the members portal, because I just want to see how it organically grows and if people find value in it. And so this has been an awesome test. So once again, you guys all know this because you got the first newsletter, issue 1. The only right answer is test. So this was a fantastic test today. Thank you all for hopping on. I don't even think I decided to put this on as a live event till maybe yesterday or the day before. And here we all are. So this is fantastic, and it's a special community, and I'm honored to be part of this with you all. So yeah, thank you so much.
thank you so much, Scott, and everyone else as well.
Yeah. All right, everyone. Talk to you later, and I'll see you guys around in the community. And let's keep growing this thing. Let's keep the anti-net revolution alive, and let's make thinking great again. How's that for a slogan? We'll get red hats next time I join the call. I'm gonna have a red hat. Make thinking great again. All right, you guys, stay crispy, everyone. Talk to you later. Have a wonderful Wednesday.